Welcome back, everyone. Great to have you here today. Love being able to talk about the topic of intermittent fasting. Yes, it is one of the most popular topics right now. So many people participating, so many people getting amazing benefits. But what happens when you take it too far? Well, on last week's episode, I shared with you what is too far and how does it affect hormones like testosterone. Now, remember, both men and women produce testosterone, and both men and women need testosterone for a healthy body. And those signs of lower testosterone can be lower drive, lower libido, lower stamina, lower endurance, lower, I think I said ambition, not as feeling as strong. So all of those things are super important, and you want to make sure that you're keeping healthy and normal levels of testosterone. So definitely check out last week's episode if you haven't already on how intermittent fasting can affect testosterone in both a positive and negative way, and how it affects it in a negative way. And of course, all the studies that go along with that. That was episode 2006. Today is episode 2013. So for all of today's show notes, you can always go to stephencabral.com/2013. So to be honest, before all of the clinical research on this came out, because I've been using intermittent fasting in my practice now for 20 years. I mean, really, before, it was, it was like the thing, right? And it's not because, I was so far ahead of the curve. It's just that clinical practice you're doing, and I always related this to personal training as well. Like whatever is working, it's not going to make it in the textbooks or the research studies for about a decade, right? So that's why it's great to listen to different experts in their area on podcasts or read their books, because literally they're going to share with you what's actually working before it's even proven out in the research studies. And that makes sense, right? Because you have to actually go and get funding for these studies, and they have to be based on something. So people are saying, hey, in the real world, we see this working. Why don't you put it to the test? Why don't you research, right? So I've been using intermittent fasting for a long time. So have many of my colleagues. Again, like I'm not the only one doing this, of course. But I've always looked at it from an unbiased perspective, because the truth is, at the end of the day, my job is to help people get results. That's my only job. People can maybe enjoy listening to the podcast or reading my book or any of those things. And I appreciate that. I truly do. But at the end of the day, my job, literally my job, is to help people get results. The problem is that whatever can be really good for you could also be harmful. And that's just why I have this podcast on intermittent fasting, to just make sure that what is good for you doesn't mean that you should push it to the highest limit possible, where then it doesn't become good for you. So I'm a huge advocate of intermittent fasting. Now I've been a huge advocate of intermittent fasting for 20 years. And what I want to do is just make sure we're always using it safely. So I've talked about many times how to use it safely. Again, like I said, I have a whole podcast series on intermittent fasting. It's literally called Intermittent Fasting, if you want to find it on iTunes, Spotify, or any of your favorite players. But what I want to share with you again today is from a clinical perspective. We already knew that this was going to be the case, myself and many of my colleagues. Now, all the PhDs get involved and they start to do research studies, which is fantastic, because now we can show you that if a woman fasts for too long or chronically does longer intermittent fasting, they're actually going to get dips in female hormones as well as thyroid. And I want to demystify this, break it down, and share with you exactly why this happens. Because if you know why it happens, then you can know how far you can push it without the negative side effects happening. Because again, we know intermittent fasting is amazing. It's the closest thing we have to the fountain of youth. But what happens when we take it too far? Okay, well, let's go over that now. So really important, like I said, that everyone is using some type of intermittent fasting. Most people are going to do phenomenally well. I'm not going to go over the quarterly and the yearly fast and those types of things, and even the weekly. But most people do phenomenally well with 12 hours overnight. And I've already given you why you should start your intermittent fast about 5 or 6 p.m. at night. Go back, check out previous shows on that, because I can't turn that into this podcast. So that is not difficult, right? People are like, I can't intermittent fast, but you can just stop eating right around 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock at night. Finish your dinner. That starts your fast. I know that the food is digesting, but we don't count that as part of it. And if you go until 6 a.m. the next morning, you've already gone 12 hours, right? So it's actually not that challenging to go to 8 a.m. Now, for women, I'm going to give you exactly why. If you start to feel feelings of fatigue in the morning or during the day, brain fog, weight gain, inflammation, water accumulation where your body feels puffier, or you start to see like creases and dents on the skin from, where their clothes are fitting maybe a little too tight, excuse me. If you start to, your libido starts to go down, you just don't have the same energy or drive that you used to, or ambition. If you start to get a dysregulated menstrual cycle, where your periods are a little bit lighter, or your cycle goes longer or shorter, this can be a sign that your body is dysregulated in terms of female hormones. A few other things to look at are actually thinning of the hair on the top of the head, thinning of the outside of the eyebrow, more for the thyroid, acne maybe around the chin, or more bloating, cramping towards the end of your cycle, more like days 21 through, let's say, 28 of your cycle. So all these things super important because you want to catch them now, because if you don't, then it's going to lead to potentially high cholesterol. It's going to lead to more of the hair thinning, more of the low mood, more of the depression, more of the weight gain, more osteoporosis as you get older. So that's why, again, we want to check these things now. Now, I gave you most of them because those are signs, those can be signs of disrupted estrogen and progesterone. But many of the same signs of low thyroid act exactly the same way. With low thyroid, okay, thinning of the top of the hair for women, thinning of the outside of the eyebrow, thinning of the skin, dry skin, cold hands and feet. We've got brain fog. We've got weight gain. It's lowered metabolism, right? I mean, that's what thyroid is. Thyroid's a great regulator of metabolism, and heat is part of that. Thermogenesis is part of metabolism, so you get the poor circulation, right? Low mood, tired. It's just the lows. So this is important to look for that. Now, a lot of people say to me, well, I've been intermittent fasting for months and it just started now, so it can't be that because I've been doing this for months. Well, one thing I want to share with you is that it's an accumulation over time. So I wrote a book called The Rain Barrel Effect, which explains this. Now, if your rain barrel is fairly empty, which is a great thing, you get some stress and you add more stress and more stress. It doesn't overflow right away because your body's great at compensating. Now, if you were close to the top, which a lot of people are, I see many women on keto diets, very low carb diets, and intermittent fasting, their body plateaus. Like it stops losing weight after 3 to 4 weeks, and they actually start going backwards. They get really low mood. They get really tired, brain fog, and they start to gain the weight even if they're on that keto-based diet. So if that's you, it's not your fault. Like literally, you're not doing anything wrong. Your body's starting to fight back. So now let me explain why this happens, okay? Because then at the end, we'll share the happy medium of how to actually make this happen. Well, before I get to that, if anybody's like, it sounds like me, but I don't know if it's like, if I don't know if it's me, there's a lab that you can run right at home, literally the best lab in the world. It's for hormones. It's called the Stress Hormones Mood and Metabolism Lab. It tests your estrogen to progesterone. This is for men and women. Your estrogen to progesterone ratio to see if you're estrogen dominant. It looks at DHEA and testosterone. It looks at cortisol 4 times during the day. AM, which is going to be low if you're tired typically and fatigued and brain fog, then at noon, then at around 5 p.m. and then before bed. And if you can't sleep at night, you might have higher levels of cortisol. Good to check out. Then it looks at your T4, free T3, TSH, TPO antibodies. It looks at your insulin, vitamin D, hemoglobin A1C. The best test out there if you're having difficulty losing weight or you're lower mood or you think you have a lowered metabolism. All right, so let's move on now. Why does this happen? Okay, it happens because of this. Intermittent fasting, just like sauna, just like a cold plunge, just like a hard workout, they're all forms of stress in the body. You might say, well, okay, it's a stress, but it's a good thing, right? Well, it's a good thing. Workouts are good. Saunas can be good. Some cold baths can be good. Too much of a good thing is a bad thing in the body when the body can no longer keep up or it believes it's in a survival-based state. So again, workout's good. Grueling 2-hour workouts and not enough sleep, not enough nutrition, not good, right? So it's not for me or you to even say or decide, or your favorite guru. It's not for them to decide what is best for you. Your body is always telling you. Right? Lab testing tells you definitively, but if you listen to your body, you can also see. So what happens is this. Intermittent fasting is a stress. Longer fasts are a greater stress. What is the issue with female hormones then that's a little different than men, but I proved to you last week in these studies with testosterone, when a woman's body is under stress, it has to decide, is the environment, because our body's an organism. So our organism lives within a greater organism, which is the world, nature around us. And your body gets feedback. It gets feedback from the proprioceptors of the body, the peripheral nervous system, and the central nervous system. Central nervous system basically delineates into your autonomic nervous system, and your autonomic nervous system branches into your fight or flight, which is called your sympathetic nervous system, and the other side, which is the parasympathetic, the rest, relax, digest. Okay. To make that a little bit simpler, is your body stressed? That's fight or flight. Or is it relaxed? That's parasympathetic, right? That's the rest and relax. Okay. So when you're in a fast, you're moving more sympathetic. What does your body do? Well, it produces typically more norepinephrine, an excitatory neurotransmitter. It may produce more dopamine, maybe, at least in the short term, to get you out there, get you looking for food, right? Back in the day. Well, our minds haven't really changed. That limbic part of the brain hasn't changed. And it produces more cortisol. Okay, the stress hormone, which is going to break down glycogen to use for fast fuel. So over time, these stressors tell the body and the delicate nervous system, you are not in a good place. You in a survival-based spot. Look at all these stress hormones and neurotransmitters, excitatory neurotransmitters being produced. We're going to do this. We're going to put the brakes a little bit, especially on progesterone. Progesterone levels are going to start to dip in women. Again, I've run tens of thousands of labs on this. And I can tell you, progesterone is what dips first. That leads to then a lot of luteal phase dysfunction. And to put that in normal talk, that means about 5 days to 10 days before you would get day one of menstruation, you start to feel more bloated or gaining water weight or lower mood or anxiety or acne or oily skin, any number of things that happen during that luteal phase when progesterone should be higher. That takes care of a lot of those symptoms. That's called estrogen dominance. And again, you can test that at that at-home lab that I will link up today at stephencabral.com/2013. So what causes that progesterone to dip? Higher levels of cortisol. That's it. Higher levels of stress hormones will cause progesterone to dip. But when you have higher levels of glucocorticoids and norepinephrine, think of norepinephrine as like adrenaline, like it's surging through your body. You're getting you going, right? That's why people feel so alert when they're fasting, because their body is surging oftentimes with stress hormones. All right, that's not the only reason, but I'm being fair, right? Part of it is that you're not using energy for digestion. So that's also helpful for energy, right? We want to look at both sides. So what happens is when the body produces those stress hormones from the HPA axis, the hypothalamus telling the pituitary gland, telling your adrenals, hey, produce norepinephrine, we're stressed. Produce glucocorticoids, we're stressed, we're in fight or flight. What does it do? It actually starts to then slow thyroid production, or it stops thyroid T4 from becoming the active form of thyroid hormone called T3, right? Can be converted to reverse T3. So now we have lower progesterone, and we have lower thyroid. Well, what does that mean? Well, no big deal for a day or so. But what happens over weeks? Over weeks, it lowers your metabolism and it dysregulates your menstrual cycle. So now women are retaining more water, gaining more weight, having more difficulty losing weight, getting frustrated, they're lower mood, they are trending more towards depression, they have less ambition, less drive, less libido, their muscle tone isn't as great, and their skin starts to get thinner, may even get some adult acne and thinning hair. And I've worked with so many women, and they're like, yeah, well, that perfectly describes me. And I say, well, here's the thing. The good news is this. We know exactly why that happens. I mean, like, that's the good news. The bad news is it does happen, but it's actually a protective mechanism from the body saying we need to slow metabolism so now you can survive on less calories, right? That's part of the reason why. And we need to dysregulate or just lower sex hormones so that you're not going to get pregnant, because the environment that you're living in is not a safe environment. You're in a stressed environment, and that's probably not good for the child coming into this world. So what do we need to do? Well, we just reverse engineer it, and we use a couple different things. And first, if possible, we lab test, and then we're going to give the thyroid a little support. We're going to use something like full spectrum magnesium. We're going to use something like Adrenal Soothe. We're going to use maybe estrogen balance if there's estrogen dominance. And we're going to give the body more micronutrients, B vitamins, more nourishment, so that it feels like, oh, okay, we're getting all of our nutrients. And then we're going to use reverse dieting that I've done on our previous podcast to slowly increase the caloric intake and slowly increase some carbs, because carbohydrates are the only macronutrient that cuts cortisol and stress. Because fat is great, right? It's a good fuel source. Protein is great. Protein, believe it or not, taken enough, it can actually be converted to carbs, it can be converted to glucose, so that can work. But we can also just give the body what it wants, and it's a healthy version of carbohydrates, not going overboard, and that's how we can help in the long run too. So you might say to yourself, well, intermittent fasting then sounds terrible for women. No, not at all. Not at all. Here's what you want to think about. You can still do 12 to 14 hours. That seems to be the sweet spot for most women. The only thing is when you start to get revved up from the day, that's when you typically need to have breakfast. So that's what we see from most women dealing with this. Not every woman deals with this. I'm not saying that, right? But what I am saying is you can still get all the results you want with breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You don't only have to do 2 meals a day. I mean, again, you can still get all the results you want. So it's working with what's called bioindividuality. And if your body's a little bit more stressed, we can't pretend that it's not stressed. So we're still going to do 12 to 14 hours. We're going to stop eating a little bit earlier at night. We're going to start eating just something light when we start to get going for the day. You can check out my previous podcast on what to have. And we can do other things to lose weight. Once we get the metabolism going a bit, we can do a functional medicine detox. We can even use the fat velocity system. We can do things like that. It's still going to work great. And then what I would say is if you're someone that likes to do a 24-hour fast once a week, I've talked about that before. Okay, there's not an issue once you get your metabolism normalized again, but you're just not going to want to do a hard workout that day or a big stressful day that day, right? So it just can't be a super stressful day because then you're telling your body, wow, we're not eating and we're under stress, which is the hard workout. So all it is again, working with your bioindividuality. Some people a little bit more sympathetic nervous system primed. Those people just have to be careful with the length of time that they're fasting. So hopefully this was helpful. Remember, I'm going to be doing many more of these shows and I've done many in the past. So what I'll do is I'll link up to all the previous intermittent fasting shows. I'll even link up to all my female hormone shows and my thyroid shows. So if you really want to dive deep, you can get that. And I'll link up a couple of PubMed studies as well. So if you want to look at the research on this, you can do that too. But remember, no matter what really happened to your body, there's always an underlying root cause that can be rebalanced. You can get back to health, a healthy metabolism, a healthy body, a healthy brain. There's just no doubt about it. You can do it. All right. So thanks so much for tuning in. And until next time, which is tomorrow, I'll talk with you soon. And of course, if this show is helpful, please do feel free to pass it along to anyone else you believe it could serve. Take care, everyone.